Hey guys, welcome to the studio. Come on in, make yourself comfortable. What I'd like to talk about in this particular video are subtle differences. And I think it applies to a lot of things. And some things I think are so subtle that I think people have this placebo effect and say, well, I can hear something. And if you can't hear it, you need to have your hearing checked. But let's talk about a couple of things like mic preamps, for instance. I think things with mic preamps, the differences between them, especially when you get to really expensive preamps, can be so subtle that I don't really think it's that important when you're doing your recordings. I think you should just go ahead and pick a quality preamp that potentially has the features you need in it. These art preamps are very popular and very friendly priced. You might think you need one of these 1073 Neve clones or actually one of the original units. And if you can afford that, I would say fine. For home recording, and that's really basically what I base a lot of these videos around, I don't think that's necessary. I think the same also applies for a couple of plugins. I think some people just swear by having the UAD or the Slate or some of the Waves. Some of these plugins you just got to have. And while I'm not discounting them, I think those products are very good. I think for the home recording enthusiast, you can get great results. In fact, I think the fact that if I'm using this mic here and I've got my guitar speaker right here and I move my guitar speaker this much or the mic, that's going to make a much more of a sonic impact than particularly what type of mic preamp you're using or what kind of compressor plug-in you're running it through, or actually what type of EQ plug-in that you're running it through. That recording the sound source is much more important than it is as far as what really happens after that. In other words, you're not going to get world-class recordings at home unless you're putting world-class recordings into the microphone or through your analog digital converters. That's what's really important. I think you can talk to any pro in the field and he will tell you, give me great musicians, give me world-class input, I'll mix it on a Behringer board, or Behringer, or however you want to say it, or a little cheap Mackie board, rather than give me lousy musicians and let me run that on a Neve or solid-state Logic board. They're going to go for the best musicians with the very budget-minded equipment, because they know it's the operator, it's the trained ears. Remember, I always talk about the ears. That's much more important in the long run. Now, like I say, I know this is very controversial. I may get a lot of negative feedback that says you don't have any idea what you're talking about, but I do have an idea about what I'm talking about. I've used some of this very high-end gear in the studio, some of this vintage boutique gear, basically back then when it was newer and wasn't considered vintage, and I'm finding that although it's very nice, I just assume have a nice clean preamp nowadays. You know, a nice clean Mackie preamp works great, or one of these art preamps that I'm talking about, and they don't cost you an arm and a leg. Instead, invest your money elsewhere in studio monitors to where you can hear what you're recording, or acoustically treat your room, or better instruments, or things like that. But don't labor over the subtle differences that you have between mic preamps, even types of mics, you know, dynamic mics or condenser mics. Just get something good, because nowadays we are so gifted to have all these great tools and recording equipment at our disposal. It isn't anything like it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. We're really blessed to have what we have nowadays. Again, that's my opinion. I'm standing on my soapbox. I appreciate you guys sticking around to watch the video. I'm certainly open to comments. Remember to subscribe. We'll talk to you later. Thanks, guys.